Brothers and sisters, last week God was the landowner, right? He goes out and hires laborers for the vineyard in order to show us one aspect of our relationship with God. This week, Jesus continued using the image of the vineyard and emphasizes the importance of His love and mercy for us by inviting His two sons to work on the vineyard. The father says, "Son, go out and work on the vineyard." As I reflected upon these two Gospels, the Gospel from last week and this week, I have noticed a great connection between these two powerful parables in order to continue answering for ourselves the question, who is God? Or who do you think God is? And only then, when we truly know who God is, then we are able to discern or figure out for ourselves what God wants us to do in our life. Now, who do you think God is? A landowner or a master, like last week's gospel? If God is the master, then are we His slaves? And if we are slaves, then there is a master and slave relationship in which the slaves only do the will of the master, right? And then the slaves are not free. They are bound to this kind of relationship. They are bound to the master will. And if they are not obedient to the will of the master, then what happened? They will be punished. So the slaves would always then live in fear. But brothers and sisters, God doesn't want us to be living our life in fear or always thinks of ways that we can please God in whatever we do. God doesn't want us to have that kind of obedience out of fear. So using the image of the father inviting his sons to go and work in the vineyard, God has shown us our unique and special relationship with God as father and son, or father and daughter of God. The two sons in the gospel today, neither one of them is perfect, right? None of them would totally listen and obey to the will of the Father. The first one says no to the Father from the beginning, which in that culture was an insult, because no one would dare to say no to the will of the Father. But then we can suppose that he felt guilty and then went out to work in the vineyard. The second son says yes to the will of the Father, but never goes to work on the vineyard. Who is God to them, that they would easily refuse or respond no to the will of the Father or of God? Then we answer the question, who is God for us? Who is God for you and for me? Is God a powerful but abusive fatherly figure that we would say yes to him from the beginning, our fear, and then realize that we don't want to obey his will because we are first unwilling to do so, like the second son in the gospel today? Or is God a loving, forgiving, compassionate God, never want to upset, never want to disappoint, never want to hurt our feeling, and yet when we think we really know who God is, we would take advantage of his love and mercy for us to go ahead and to respond no to his invitation anyway. Neither son is perfect. Neither way of the responses is perfect. But yet, God values the one who says no and does the work. after all, more than the one who says yes and lie to him and never go out and work. Today, God desires us to imitate Christ in his complete obedience to the will of the Father, as St. Paul today talks about. Though Jesus was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God something to be grasped at. Rather, he emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, and obediently accepted the cross, even died on the cross. Now understand, brothers and sisters, who God is, and imitate on what he has done for us on the cross. St. Paul has challenged you and I, or you and me, or all of us, to put on the same attitude of Christ, an attitude of obeying God to the point of death. God is looking for a change within us that leads to that complete obedience to the will of the Father, instead of the will of someone else or the will of our own. This attitude of obeying God to the point of death leads us to be faithful to the vows that you have taken with your spouse in front of God, that you would love and honor your spouse to the point of death. Obedience is a key. I have a funny story to tell you, talking about obedience. There was a man who worked all of his life and have saved a lot of money, but he's stingy. Just before he died, he said to his wife, "When I die, I want you to take all my money and put in the casket with me, because I want to take all my money to the afterlife." Well, he died. He was stretched out in the casket, and his wife was sitting next to him, dressed in white, sorrowful, and his friend was sitting next to her. When they finished the ceremony, just before the undertakers got ready to close the casket, the wife said, "Wait, just a moment, please." She had a little box with her. She came over with the box to the casket and put that box into the casket. Then the undertakers locked the casket and they rolled it away. Her friend said, "Girl, I know you are not fool, right? To put all the money into the box for your husband?" The loyal wife replied, "Listen, I am a Christian. I cannot go back on my word. I promised with him, and I would have to do it." "You mean you tell me that you put all that money in the casket with him?" "I sure did," says the wife. "I got it all together. I put it in my bank account. I wrote him a check, and if he can cash it, he can spend it." Brothers and sisters, talking about obedience, be careful. If you are still dating and in a serious relationship with someone, it is a good idea for you, brothers and sisters, to do a little preview of what you will be promising to your future spouse. And if you are single, available, and would like to do God's will in your life to that complete obedience to God, then I would encourage you to think about the possibility of becoming priest. The possibility to the vocation to the priesthood and religious life. The gospel today reminds us of something that we often forget. Words can be meaningless, promises are empty if not followed by action. Jesus asks us today to think and see if our action and words in life are in agreement. It is easy to talk and make statements, but it is difficult for us to give time, effort, and attention to fulfill our promises. It is easy to say that we have to put on the same attitude of Christ, to be obedient and to be prayerful, but it is difficult for us to establish that habits and commitments in our life. Action do speak louder than words. Jesus values little or small acts than just simple promises, but empty. Brothers and sisters, today there are 2 points to take away. God is not a dictator. God is not a master that He always trying to find ways to punish us. However, God is a loving Father, always invite us to go and work in the church, to go and work in His vineyard. Because Jesus today, through His complete obedience, has given us a great example of obedience. Through His obedience to the will of the Father, through His faithfulness to His call and mission in life, and through His prayers and sacrifices for all of us. So brothers and sisters, as our action always speak louder than words, maybe today we are called to be more conscious about what we are doing here at Mass. In the way that we bring our petition to the Lord, in the way that we participate in Mass, in the way of our standing, kneeling, or our gesture at Mass. And as we are putting on the same attitude of Christ today, maybe you are called to renew your vow with your spouse today, to honor and love your spouse to the end of time. And maybe for some of you, thinking about the possibility of to the priesthood and religious life today as we continue to celebrate the priestly Sunday or the priesthood Sunday. Who is God for you? Then prove it.